the government is very much centralized science and scientific discovery, and there is this scientific industrial complex that Fauci at least apparently he appears to be at the top of it, but we don't know how deep that goes.
Yeah, and I think this really points out, and I don't think it's been written about enough, the beginning of the end for scientific inquiry really is consensus. And what was the first consensus? The first big consensus was climate consensus. And people are always like, well, gosh, it has to be true because all of the scientists are for it. But it turns out that all of the scientists that are for the climate consensus have one thing in common. They all work for the government. And so you get unified groupthink when it's funded by one source, because all it takes is, like Fauci at NIH, he's been there 40 years, so he believes gain of function is fine. So everybody does. The consensus does, because they're all getting our money via Fauci. But climate was the test run for this, and it still is referred to as the consensus. And anybody breaks consensus, like I think there are some of the networks who won't let you on if you do not. You have to first, bow down and give allegiance to the consensus. COVID became that way too.
Yeah, and I know you've worked with him a lot. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya points out the price you would pay as someone that might be a recipient of either NIH funding or NIH blessed private funding. Your career was ruined if you questioned the consensus.
Yeah, and Bhattacharya has been great. And one of the things he wrote was that, and this is sort of a profundity in one sentence, he said that you have to separate the funders from the policymakers. It can't be the same people. So if I'm funding and creating the science and improving the sciences, and I also create policy, and so, for example, if I'm creating the policy to mandate a vaccine, but I'm also doing the studies on the vaccine, and then lo and behold, my agency gets money from the vaccine manufacturers. I mean, for a long time, we were worried about, and still are these individual scientists getting royalties from the vaccine makers? But now even that's minuscule compared to Moderna has an agreement with NIH. They gave them $400 million, or the NIH says they owed us that, but they got $400 million. So no one who's on the receiving end of that $400 million can be objective now about their vaccine, because the more it's mandated, the more money NIH will make. And this is a real problem. And other people are pointing out that even the journals, Lancet and all the journals that are somewhat controlled by Big Pharma now, they aren't really as objective as you'd like to think. They're peer-reviewed and all this, but there's so much of the money that comes in the form of advertising and support from Big Pharma that there really isn't the objectivity you would hope for.
So I suspect you and I have always believed that private medical innovation is one of the most important things that free market capitalism brings to us. But I've struggled with this blurring of the lines that you're describing right now. It's not at all clear to me that we have anything approximating a market when it comes to the development of right. medical innovation, particularly when it comes to vaccines.
So much of it is controlled by the government, and then controlled by people like Fauci controlled it for 40 years, but he appointed everybody beneath him. So he's probably got another 50 years of control because everybody in the upper echelon was all appointed by him. The chance of getting someone outside of Fauci's world is slim and none. I think what you need for innovation in science and in medicine also may be crimped by the idea of everything is uniform in the payment. And with most economic innovation, you need to allow the invention to be, if it's a really good invention that people want, for people to pay more for it. So you have to have the openness to a high price. And then, the beauty of it, and I love the Schumpeter statement, the miracle of capitalism is not that queens can have silk stockings, but that eventually the factory girl has silk stockings, or calculators, or what have you. They're expensive in the beginning, but if you don't allow the price to go up, and since the price of medicine, almost everything is fixed by government, government's half of medicine or more, in terms, somebody's kind of follow that lead. But there's outrage if something costs too much. But in the beginning, things have to cost more, and then the early adopters will be the wealthy until people say, wow, there's a market, now we've got to bring the price down to get more people to buy it.